Hey everyone, I'm Clive,
Hey, and I'm Louie. Thanks for joining.
and today we are continuing the five-part webinar series. And today's episode is all about managing BIM projects. We'll go through the current situation, so what teams are using processes and standards to manage their BIM projects, some of the challenges that they're experiencing, and then we'll look at a demonstration of best practices inside of Plannerly. We hear you say quite often, please do more demos, do more product. So we're obliging, happily obliging. So Louis, are there any BIM guidelines or processes out there?
Well, I think there's one, maybe two per country.
So we see lots of great guidelines and guidance about organizational requirements. How do you form organizational requirements that then inform project information requirements and exchange information requirements between parties, and asset information requirements, specifically if you're looking for maybe an asset model as a handover from the project model after the project is completed? And how do you go about BIM execution planning? Is it pre-contract BIM execution planning? Is it post-contract? Do you have a responsibility matrix? Do you have a task information delivery plan and a master information delivery plan? Do you know the difference between the two? Can you tie them into a responsibility matrix or a RACI chart? Who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed? And there are many others. So there are great guidelines, Louis, yeah?
They're great. Many are for specific uses and reasons, but overall they're really good.
And there are many tools that teams can use to manage these, whether it's a simple table that's in a spreadsheet. Maybe you're taking your BIM execution plans online using things like Google Docs and the like. So you end up with companies like Google creating fantastic tools to manage word processing. Microsoft for fantastic Excel, you cannot ignore it. Brilliant and used and very versatile. For scheduling, programming, scheduling, P6, Oracle, another big software player for lots of really detailed schedules. Atlassian and many others, but using task management like Trello. And then Autodesk as well, another big company specifically in the BIM space that takes care of some of the checking. And you will have Celebri and many other tools in these spaces. The challenge that teams sort of face, though, is that when you have these tools, they are best-in-class tools. They are fantastic tools, but they haven't been developed for our workflow and for communicating throughout from one stage to the next. So even though you can do this, it does take a little bit of effort to actually accomplish that.
Yeah, a lot of that, a lot of that can be very confusing, and you're not alone. You are not alone if we mentioned many of the standards out there with the abbreviations or the TLAs. You're not alone in understanding and trying to kind of comprehend the whole process and trying to understand what teams are doing out there.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not something you should feel confused by on your own. There are many people suffering from the same challenges and confusion. So what types of challenges do all of these requirements and guidelines and best practices really create? What are the challenges that some teams fall into?
We hear a lot of teams, find some standards just to be not fit their workflow or their project needs. So, having flexibility. A lot of the times, if teams don't understand the process, you end up with a lot of rework, scheduling conflicts, clashes, progress updates are just unmanageable. So a lot of these are just some of the items or challenges that surface.
And we find that when those tools are disconnected from each other, when you open a new project, you start from scratch and you reinvent the wheel. You're forced to start a schedule and think, oh, what do I need to schedule? Or what are the tasks that I need to manage in my to-do list?
Yeah, each step of the workflow in a different platform, you kind of have to start from scratch all over again.
And there might be a different owner of that. And the information starts to become scattered in those different tools in different places. And unfortunately, even though with the best BIM managers trying to guide and steer those teams, we end up with confused teams. So teams that are trying to follow this, that have been doing their work for years and years, but they end up being confused by BIM, not really being helped by BIM.
Yeah.
And when teams are working on projects, this is one example that we've seen where duplicate effort occurs if people are not sure about what they should do and when they should do it, or are unclear or can't follow what they have been in those many different scattered locations told what they should do. The architect might model a light fitting. It might be in 2D, it might be a representation. You might have interior designer modeling a light fitting. You might have electrical engineer. and a contractor. And actually, this is a real life situation where we had, these aren't the exact elements, but pretty similar, where we had multiple parties all modeling the same element. And that was a huge amount of duplicate effort. We also get times where teams are not following a priority structure, and we end up with lots of clashes, and that is all rework. And when teams are using these tools in lots of different ways and trying to follow these workflows, one person is usually responsible for gathering the updates. And it is like herding cats, is the fantastic expression there. and that ends up that people miss their due date. So unfortunately, the deliverable is late, and a lot of the time those deliverables do not meet the requirements that have been set.
Yeah, it's certainly something we didn't expect to receive as a client. They always expect some great, very AR, VR ready model. And
what's wrong with this? It's fine.
It's a brick building. That's what I wanted.
And so out of all of that, what's the worst that can happen when you have complex processes? You're trying to simplify things and improve things with BIM, but what's the worst thing that can happen to your project, really?
Well, the process can derail. The standards may fall short. The process will fall short. The information, quantities, the BIM use itself is unmanageable, and you just don't meet that deliverable.
So let's talk about some best practices. Let's switch it over. Let's not be so sad about the situation, and let's see what we can do about it. So there are 4 that we're going to cover. The first one, and this will all be in the software, the first one will be talking about how you can really manage the detailed requirements. And the second will be how integrating all of those tools can streamline a workflow. Then it also means that you don't have to reinvent the wheel at every single step. So when you open a new tool, you would be starting from scratch, but we'll share how an integrated workflow you can leverage the upstream work in the downstream process. And then we'll also look at how it's not just one person herding cats. It's actually opportunity for everyone to manage their own tasks. We're going to look at how to define the information requirements clearly for different model purposes. It's about tailoring those requirements to specific purposes.
Mm-hmm. There are many types of processes, methods, and standards. So maybe we want to show them how we can actually manage them in one location and manage different types of processes and standards.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the first one is at the high level of what standard you're following. So you'll see here the new ISO 19650 level of information need. This is a representation to show what your standard is for the downstream work, and we'll see that a little bit later. But lots of information requirements we saw there, Louis. Exchange information requirements, asset information requirements. How do we manage all of these in separate documents? Well, we say that let's not do that. Let's put them all in the same place, and let's organize them in tabs under the plan.
These documents are usually located in Google Drive, SharePoint, and all these other locations. But why is it that it's scattered and then it's lost in an email somewhere, or it's probably outdated as soon as it was PDF?
And the response to an exchange information requirements or a set of tender requirements is a pre-contract BIM execution plan that then turns into a post-contract BIM execution plan. Wouldn't it be great if we could combine and evolve those in the same place and follow a workflow? And there's lots more about this, but management of the content as containers so that we can review what's in a container, edit everything that we need to, and then progress it at a pace, not having to work the whole document or send the whole document for approval. So that is one part of gathering all of those requirements in the same location.
Yeah. Well, I think another example is like training videos. I've seen teams just add all their training videos into one of these plans just to consolidate all of that. So I thought that was a really neat idea.
So your next question, Louis, was how to...
Yeah, so we took a look at all the processes and methods and standards. Now, another challenge we had was defining the right information for a specific BIM use. So depending on what that model is going to be like, we might need a light fixture for the design review process, or a different type of light fixture model for 3D coordination or information for the handover. How can we specify or assign that responsibility and communicate that information to those teams who will be modeling that? or contracted to for that information.
Yep. So I'm going to add a custom element in here for the light fixture that we were looking at before. And I know that light fixture is something like this as a name or a number. And I know that when I spec it early on in the symbolic representation, it looks a little bit like this. So we can see this is a 2D representation of that. And then for some form of generic representation, I have another image that looks a bit like this. And we also have that's a more detailed or fabrication level. And actually, this is an image of all of them at the same point. So I want to crop this out. And the point here is an image is how many words, Louis?
1,000.
1,000 words. So in that process, we've just helped the team by creating something with not just 1,000, but 3,000 words. We've just helped them.
We've clearly defined the level of geometry required for each of these BIM uses without having to get lost in the conversation of LOD. That's just keeping it simple.
What else would we want to describe for this light fitting? Maybe at handover, we need to have certain items in a checklist for what's the housing color?
Yeah. So the housing color, the inset colors was one of those on the list, and
inset colors.
The light distribution as well.
See how international we are? Look, we've got color with a U and with an O, light distribution type. So these are things that we need to check based on certain requirements. And there might also be certain specifications as well that we need to follow. So for example, I'm just going to drag and drop a specification in here for this that might be required by the owner. And now if I open that, you'll see this is linked out to this specific light fixture. If you have required elements, we have.
Yeah, if you have families, Revit families, drop them in here as well. So any information that usually could be in one library or another document somewhere, just why can't we contain all of that information and prepare that for the modeling teams or the teams who's going to take that to the next step of the workflow?
Yep, and we might have a way of describing what we're asking for, what we're looking for. And if I was to just copy something in here, you can see now we've got a light fixture with a description, with a set of requirements that we need to check. We could also have information requirements, which might be lumens, or so the lumen output, what's the value specifically for this? And we need to check that that is being adhered to by the team. So that's defining clearer requirements.
Yeah. Containing all that information in an area can be helpful. But now the next step of the workflow for another team, possibly, we then have to recreate this work in another platform. So how can we do this here, Claude?
That's a great question, Louis. So once we've created something in here, this lighting item with specific requirements in the scope, when we move to the schedule, we will then see a blank screen like we're very used to, but on the right-hand side, there's a tab that we can use to bring out what the requirements are and start from those requirements. So for this example, for handover, if there's a handover model, this was the requirement for the lighting. We're going to say specifically that this lighting task is required at that point in time by whom? We should have an electrical engineer or a contractor. Let's say it's the contractor's responsibility. And this is how long it's going to take them to update all of those light fixtures. And it's the same task. So instantly, we have all of those details for this specific light in this group that a contractor can come through, and they don't have to reinvent the wheel. They don't have to think about what this task name is. They simply drag from that list of unscheduled tasks until they have filtered and created all of their tasks. So I'm going to simulate that. Louis, can you fill for a second? I'm going to bring in another example scope from somebody else.
Yeah. So each task is each task that you've created contains that information through every step of the workflow. There's a tracking information on each container, and it automatically updates as you provide dates, durations on the schedule. The tracking module, which will have statuses on what the status is on that tracking of that card, And also when you can get more granular and assign each of those tasks to specific team members. So not just to a certain team like the contractor, but who is actually doing that work. And that could be me, that could be Clive, that could be anybody on the project that is specifically responsible for modeling that content.
And knowing who. So one of the very useful guidelines is to create a responsibility matrix. The cell that you see here for the handover milestone has now contractor added. And we can quickly assign those responsibilities using the assignment tool on the right-hand side, this quick assign. So we could say that the architect is responsible here. So you can see there, we've got been added. And then maybe it's somebody else that's responsible later, but let's say it's the architect again at 3D coordination for these lights. Now we know where the handover is of responsibility from the architect to the contractor for this. And it's not just a geometry that's required for the 3D coordination. Here we also have information requirements and checklist items in choosing the actual product. Maybe there's another stage in between that's actually called construction as well. So now we have a responsibility matrix. What about how, I don't know whether you've jumped in and done anything in here, Louis, but maybe you could do that for us quickly to show the collaborative nature of this. Are you in this project?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we talked about was how teams usually have to manage this themselves. They have to recreate the schedule themselves for one person. It's up to one person to create. It's up to one person to manage the progress updates and such. So definitely begin to schedule each of those tasks on their own. I'm adding more HVAC equipment to the contractor.
You're giving me more tasks, it looks like.
Oh, yeah, I should put that here. There you go.
Okay.
There we go.
This starts to get into the other terminology. Right now we see everyone's tasks, but specifically for a team, if I wanted to filter this, I would say I just want to see the tasks related to the mechanical team. So you can see that straight away, and I can zoom into those. So I can now start managing my tasks on what's called a task information delivery plan. A task information delivery plan is just for essentially one set of tasks. What we're wanting to see as a manager is a group of those tasks across multiple teams. And simply by removing the filter, we would be able to do that. So now we don't have just a task information delivery plan. We have, this is an overall, a master information delivery plan where we can see all of those tasks. Some of the other terminology that we looked at, we talked about, were the RACI chart. Who's responsible? Who's accountable? Who's consulted? And who's informed of what happens at the end of it, progress? Mm-hmm. And that can be a separate chart. A lot of times it can even be a separate piece of software. So there are teams that use RACI software that is designed to manage those types of charts. But we like to break it down and put those requirements in the specific locations and make it easier for teams to manage. If you think about who's responsible for this task, the responsible party is a team in this case, but the person required, oh, and I see Louis already assigned this one to himself. Have you assigned this one? Can I assign this one? Okay, so the contractor might be the ultimate responsible team, but who's accountable at this point in time? And I'm going to give this to Louis. And you can see and track these changes. You can see that I've now assigned this to Louis. Now this task has a responsible party and an accountable party. What about who's consulted? Well, we start to get into a dependency between tasks that can depict where the discussions, where the conversations occur. And then we want to know who is informed of the progress. Well, everything that's occurring inside of the platform is actually being notified. So this is information, who's being informed, is all automated. So every time I move something, if I move one of Louis's tasks, Louis will get notified. If I am the person responsible for this task, let me do this, and then Louis, can you move this task here, the HVAC distribution? I will get notified when Louis moves that task. You there? Yeah. So Louis moved it, and I am now informed. So that's the other next part of the RACI process. One important thing as well, I saw a couple of questions for this. So you're not restricted for these tasks or just those tasks. I can just drag and create my own tasks and then drop in an image. For example, this could be a coordination meeting. Nope. So you have a task here that would be potentially an individual task, not specifically related to a set of elements. What other questions do you have for me, Louis?
So one of the things that we said was herding cats. You know, how can teams not leave this up to one person? So maybe you want to jump into the next step of the workflow. And again, we're not reinventing the wheel because we're jumping into another step. Let's jump into the track, and we're using the same set of tasks, the same set of filters to view what we have in the track.
Yep. So those tasks, how do you manage that workflow? Most of the time, to track progress, you have to ask teams for their progress updates. Well, not anymore. Teams can now have their own to-do list with their checklist items in the same environment. So I know that Louis still hasn't started the lighting task, and he hasn't done any of his checklist items on that because he hasn't started it. He's now moved it over here, so I can see that he started it. And I can also start to move my tasks as well. And I can go through the checklist items. So maybe there are specific information requirements that I need to make sure that are added to these elements. That becomes very much more integrated and easier when I'm taking it from that previous task. This now forms a global board of requirements, but the same filtering process we can do down to the team member. So if if I'm me, I know I've only got one task, so pretty boring filter there, but I can filter for just that one specific task. I can also filter for just the statuses that I care about. So the ones that I've started, I'd like to know ones that I have to fix, and that's it. So now, if I get assigned any tasks that need fixes, that will appear in my fixes column. So maybe Louis, do you want to reassign a task and put it in the fixes column, and then I'll see it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you just moved my task. Okay, that's cool. So, and I also got notified. So this is the being informed about if somebody moves your cheese. Let's do a quick recap. Combining all of the information requirements, tables, and descriptions and processes and standards in different tabs inside of the plan makes it easier to manage. We also didn't mention this much, but having the ability to grab templates from a raft of different templates and continually evolving, and some more ISO 19650 templates coming there soon as well. Being able to do that all inside of one place that is also the same place that you start scoping the requirements, and not only being able to define your requirements down to this detail for who is required to do it, what team is responsible, what specifically you're looking for, what are the checklist items that you need, what are maybe the specifications required for this, having all of that activity tracked and controlled. But also we showed how quick it is to bring that in from another project if you've got those requirements already somewhere else, another project, a template. And then this being the starting point for the schedule. So all of the tasks that are shown on the schedule are shown based on their assignment for the team. And we talked about the RACI, so which team is responsible, who actually is the member that's accountable. We can assign that. We can also see that in here if we wanted to turn off teams and on team members, so we can manage this by the accountable party as well. Who's consulted, so what are the dependencies between those tasks, who needs to be consulted on input and output of those, and then also who's informed, so being able to see and get notified of all of the changes that are occurring, and at the same time keep all of those to-do list items in the same environment and simply drag and drop to show the updates and the progress on the checklist items, and be able to see that from both a task information, task team information delivery plan, also a master information delivery plan. So being able to put a filter on for either a team member, status, etc., and also remove that filter so you can see the overall view.
Yeah, one thing we didn't mention here, and I think it's very important, is the communication. Typically you've got to send an email or a PDF or markup or comment in between these workflows. The container itself has the activity feed and a communication. So if you want to open up HVAC air distribution, I mentioned a comment to Clive in the handle, the
So
HVAC,
yeah,
the one
so
on the right. Yeah.
in any one of these screens as well, I can go to my panel up here and I can see my notification. It says that Louis mentioned me, and I can click on this and it can bring up, and great work. You're giving me a pat on the back, encouragement. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So that was a walkthrough of all of those different tools that are in one location that also use the same information in information container, this information container for tracking, for sequencing, and for monitoring, and both on the task team level and also on the overall management level. So let's go back to slides just to close out quickly. In conclusion, we would like teams from a BIM perspective to manage clear information requirements, because if you have crystal clear, if you have crystal clear information requirements, then teams know what they're going to have to do and when they're going to do it, and it's a lot more seamless. And
no matter what standard as well.
Yep. And we want you also to be able to help teams combine those different tools. So if you have integrated a more simplified workflow, the BIM management process is likely to be more successful and likely to put smiles on your team's faces and likely to provide real value from BIM that then your customer is going to see, and you're going to have a better outcome at the end of it.
I've seen process maps where they try to describe this workflow within the platform. It's already set up for you. It's like your little buddy on your shoulder. The tool is kind of integrated with the process itself, and it really helps teams understand what they need to do and what the next step is along the way for that information.
Absolutely. Yep. Let teams manage their own work. Let the process flow and make it as simple as possible. That's really, really what we are looking to do with Plannerly. Don't plan late, plan early. We also have a couple of resources for your teams if you are getting started. So there's the basics course, which is a set of 1-minute demos, plannerly.com/demo, and you can go through the basics course. And then the next one, if you're ready to take the step with a company, this is actually free for teams that have a license or are looking to get started with a company plan. You can get a masterclass for free, and now being supported in many different languages around the world as well. So get in touch, check that out. It's 4 sessions of 30 minutes each that get you started on a live project if you have one ready to go, or we can start helping build the standards and templates.